Hello and welcome to Unify's webinar on extending team developer apps with XAML. This is your host, Matt Brunquell, and our presenter today is Gary Betancourt. And before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. For those of you new to Unify Corporation, we're a publicly traded software company and we've been in business for over 30 years. And we're known for being the first to deliver a relational database in the Unix environment. Since then, we've delivered development software products that run across different databases and platforms, really geared towards building and modernizing business applications and geared to the business application developer who places a premium on productivity over low-level coding. So today our business has expanded beyond database and development products into migration and modernization solutions as well as archiving. But today we're going to focus on one of our premier development tools, Team Developer. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them during the session. And the way you do that is on your WebEx toolbar, there's a button with a question mark. Just press that button and then you're going to be able to post a question. And we'll get to it as soon as we can. We'll actually have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation and demos. But post it there. There's also a chat button, but it makes it easier for Gary and I if we just have to look at the one Q&A panel to collect all the questions. So I mentioned Gary, and it's a real treasure, I think, and a great opportunity for you guys to hear Gary speak today. He's one of our senior software engineers, and he's one of the key engineers behind the Team Developer 6.0 for .NET. He was extensively involved in the development of the compiler. And some of the specific areas in particular were the referencing, the XAML creation, and the browser application generation. He was also involved in the creation of the debugger and the expression evaluation support as well as the runtime itself. So, you know, the fact that he was so involved with the XAML piece and we have him presenting it today, Gary coded a lot of this himself. So to have him go over the principles and concepts of how you can extend Team Developer apps with XAML is a real treat. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary to start the presentation and demos.
All right. Thank you, Matt. So when we decided to target .NET build types for Team Developer, one of the primary reasons we decided on WPF rather than other technologies like WinForms is the ability it gives our end users to extend and customize their applications. And so for this presentation, I'm going to be going into XAML specifically and how you can leverage it to customize TD applications. So just a quick recap. With TD6, we have provided a new .NET-based compiler and .NET-based runtimes built on WPF technologies. Now, we still have the same great Win32 build options available if you choose to keep using those. The new .NET compiler outputs the user interface components to find the outline in a XAML format. And if you're not familiar with XAML, you should watch our archived webinar that is called Introduction to WPF and XAML, which will give you a real primer on WPF and XAML before you go into the details of XAML here. And so all of the components you have defined in your outline will be emitted as XAML, and they'll be reliant on our new TD.NET runtime controls, which are fully customizable using standard WPF technologies. So there are three...
Hold on one second. We're getting a little echo. We got a comment from the audience that we were getting an echo, and so we're trying to... Now we're experiencing the echo ourselves, so we're trying to see if we need to mute a speaker somewhere or...
I think it is on mute right now.
Okay.
So is there still an echo?
Nope, that sounds good now. Okay, good. All right, sorry for the interruption. We're trying to deal with the echo. We're not sure now whether it's a WebEx thing or not, so bear with us.
So there are three strategies to leverage XAML to customize your applications in TD6. First is going to be using the new WPF Custom control, which accepts a generic XAML and renders it at runtime. The second would be to edit the compiler's output directly. And the third would be to leverage XAML resource files to make more global style application customizations to your application. So the WPF Custom control is a new control we introduced for .NET build types only. And it has a generic XAML attribute which will accept any valid XAML snippet and renders that XAML at runtime. And we've introduced a rich set of new SAL APIs for invoking functions, getting and setting properties, and responding to any WPF events that might be raised by the child control of the WPF Custom control. And we're not going to get into too much detail on this control today, but we do have another webinar coming up about replacing ActiveX controls, and that one goes into much more detail on the WPF Custom control if you're interested. But I do have just a short demonstration of what you can do with the WPF Custom control. So here I have what I call just a GMAP application, and it is using a WPF Custom control to render a freely available Google Maps WPF control. And you can see I've dropped one here on my form, and you'll see that in the attribute inspector there's a XAML attribute, and it accepts just standard XAML, and as long as your third-party control is in the same directory as the application, we'll go ahead and pick up that control and render it at runtime. And as you can see, there's a new SAM WPF event that we've added that is specific to this control. In addition, we have some code here which allows you to invoke functions on that control. So let me go ahead and bring this up real quick. So on the left here is the actual WPF Custom control rendering this Google Maps control. And on the right is a standard TD navbar control, which is new for TD6. And I can go ahead and enter in an address. And we have an NET event on this data field here. And as I type, it's actually communicating with the control and telling it to update its location. I can also get a list of all the events that control is raising here in this list box. And so this is just a very quick and simple example of how you can leverage the WPF Custom control and its XAML capabilities to incorporate some rich third-party controls. And one of the benefits of WPF is there's a very rich user community out there, and so you'll find a wide variety of freely and commercial available controls out there for your use. So the second general approach to leveraging XAML and TD is to edit the compiler's output directly. And so the new .NET compiler will generate a XAML file for every top-level control you have defined in your project. So if you have a form, an MDI window, a table window, a XAML file will be generated for each one of those objects. And each one of those XAML files will then be compiled into a binary format called BAML, and then it will be baked into the application's executable file. And the TD.NET compiler will look in a subdirectory in your application folder for custom versions of these XAML files. And if it finds one there, it'll go ahead and compile that one into the executable rather than its version that it output. So with TD6, we've added a new right-click menu option called Custom XAML. So if you right-click on a form in the outline, you'll see this Custom XAML option with 3 new menu items. The first is going to be View Default XAML, and basically this will bring up the compiler's output of XAML. So if you're curious as to what the compiler is outputting, you'd use this option just to get a quick look at the XAML. edit custom XAML will actually place a custom, will place the compiler's output in a subdirectory in your application folder. And basically after that point on, the compiler will always pick up that version of the XAML file over its output. There's a third option to clear custom XAML, which will clear that custom version out so that the compiler's output will be selected the next time you run your application. Now when you choose to view the default XAML or the custom XAML, TD will launch an editor called kaxaml. And it's a basic XAML editor that we've modified to work with TD applications, and it allows you to edit XAML with a nice XML editor that has IntelliSense and syntax highlighting, and then it will allow you to view the updated XAML in real time. Now, we've modified the version that's freely available, so it's important to note that the version that you'd find out there on the web wouldn't work with TD's XAML files. So what can be achieved by editing the XAML files? Well, many of our TD controls simply extend from their WPF equivalents. And so, for instance, if you have a push button in TD, even though we might only expose, say, 10 attributes in the attribute inspector, there might be literally hundreds of additional properties which you can set on a standard WPF button, which will tweak its behavior or change its style behavior. And so you're not limited to what we expose in the designer. You're free to go into the XAML and set additional properties if you choose. Additionally, you can always add new objects to the window to create and enhance the look and feel of your application. And so let me give you a quick demo of doing that. So here I have a very simple form. On the left is a push button and a data field surrounded by a group box. Now the group box control is your, a very basic group box, and it's very common to want to segment out controls on a form. What if you'd like to have a more enhanced looking group box? Well, you could easily do that by editing the XAML directly. So if I go into the outline here and right click on the form, you'll see there's this new custom XAML option. Now everything is disabled right now because I first needed to compile my application to actually view its XAML. So let me go ahead and compile. Now once I do that, now I can go ahead and say edit custom XAML. So on the bottom here is the XAML that our compiler is output, and you'll see I want to go ahead and create a new group box looking control around this button and text box that's on the right here. Now I already have some snippets that I've created, so I can just copy and paste here. So what I've done here is I've created a couple of brushes, and I've given them a key here, and one is going to be just a border brush, and the other one is going to have a gradient fill for a background. Now what I've done is I've wrapped that button and text box in what's called a border. And a border is basically a box in WPF that you can apply some brushes to its border and apply some fields to achieve some gradient fill backgrounds. And so here I have a border that's up on top here, and you can see that I've given it a background which has a gradient fill, and I've given it some rounded corners, and then I've wrapped the text box and the button in another border which provides it a border as well. And so you can see it updates here in real time, so I'll go ahead and save this. Now when I run this application, I need to actually change the UI just a little bit so it actually picks up the compiler output. Okay, so now it's picked up my edits to that XAML file, and you'll notice that I get a nice looking group box control here wrapped around my two controls. And so this is a very simple example of how you can go and edit your custom XAML to achieve some great looking look and feels. Now there are some downsides to this approach. The first being that any changes you make in the TD Designer are no longer going to be reflected in the user interface after you create a custom version of the XAML file. Because the compiler is always going to pick up that custom file over the version that it has generated. And so you'll have to make sure you always go in and make your edits in that custom XAML file. Second, if there's an opportunity to destabilize the window if you don't do things correctly. You'll notice that all of the UI objects that we place in the XAML file will have a XName attribute. And this is an indication to the WPF runtime that that object needs to be linked up to a back-end reference. And the order that they appear in the XAML file needs to match the order in the outline. And so if you change the order around or if you add new objects in and give it an XName attribute when you shouldn't, this could potentially cause errors at runtime. Now, most of the time our runtime can catch these errors and give you an error message at runtime, but it's not bulletproof. And so there are chances that you could have two buttons that get the wrong event wired up, for instance. And so there are risks to going in and changing the layout. Because of that, I think the more compelling option to customize your applications is leveraging XAML resource files to make more global style application changes so you don't have to actually directly edit individual XAML files. So resource files are a collection of key value pairs defined using the XAML language. And you can define a whole host of items in there, but the three ones that we're going to focus on today are control templates, brushes, and strings. And what's important is that these files can be selectively included into the application by referencing them in a global XAML file called app.xaml. So the first item I want to discuss are control templates. Control templates give a default look and feel to controls. And so when you look at a list box, for example, which is a standard WPF control, it'll have a control template that ships with that list box. And it defines a look and feel, which is a standard list box. But anybody who uses a list box can provide their own control template in a resource file and completely change how that list box looks and feels at runtime. And so if you look at the bottom left here, you can easily change a list box that is showing a list of states to a map of the United States where users can click on them and choose as a state. Now what's important is that even though the user interface is completely changed, the back-end code that handles, say, a selection event continues to work just as it would no matter how the user interface looks. And so let me go ahead and show you a demo of how you can use custom control templates to customize TD's controls. So because all of TD's controls are just standard WPF controls, you can use custom control templates to change how they look and feel as well. So here's a simple application with a CMeter control on the bottom and then a data field here on top. And on this data field I have an anyEdit, and anytime it changes I go ahead and call set progress on the CMeter control to update its value. Now what I've done here is I go ahead, you'll notice that I have this .xaml directory which holds the custom XAML, and this is where the compiler is going to look for any custom XAML files. Now rather than editing the form XAML, I'm actually going to go ahead and edit the app.xaml file. And you'll see that I'm pulling in a resource dictionary called progress-template.xaml. And so when I include this here, it's going to pull in the XAML file into memory. And so if I go to this progress-template.xaml file, you'll notice I have a control template defined. And what's key here is this target type attribute. And I've said I want to go ahead and target the progress bar control. And so when you specify progress bar here, when this control template is loaded, when this XAML file is loaded into memory, the WPF runtime system is going to look at this target type attribute, and any progress bar that you are using in your application will then have this XAML file or this XAML applied to it. And so this XAML is essentially defining what this progress bar is going to look like by using some basic WPF primitive controls like borders, lines, polygon shapes. And so if I go ahead and run this application, it's going to pull in that XAML file and change the look and feel of the progress bar. So now, instead of a standard progress bar, we get what actually looks like a speedometer. And I can still call set progress on it, and the same code, without changing any sal code, it still changes the value and operates different based on the same business logic. Now, I can easily pull in yet another XAML file to create even a different look and feel. So this is the exact same application, but now I've pulled in a different XAML file with another control template to make the progress bar look like a thermometer. And again, if I call set value on it, the business logic still continues to work just as it did before without changing any sal code, but I get a whole new user interface now. So another thing that you can do by leveraging XAML resource files is creating your own custom themes. Now, working with control templates, as I've just shown you, can be fairly advanced. It's an advanced WPF topic. But what's more simple to do is provide your own TD themes by leveraging XAML resource files. So all of TD's themes are implemented using a standard set of brushes. And as I showed you earlier with when I edited that XAML file directly, brushes are basically colors. They can be, simple solid colors like black or white or some RGB value, or they can be more complex gradient style brushes. So if you look at this screenshot on the bottom, there's what's called a linear gradient brush, where you provide as many RGB values as you want to create a gradient fill. So all of our runtime objects are filled using a standard set of keys that we define. So our runtimes ship with a dozen different themes. Each theme has different values for these various brushes. But you could easily provide your own set of brushes to provide a custom theme. So if you look at a push button, for instance, by default it's going to be filled with a key called button brush. And for the Luna Blue theme, we're going to see a gradient fill here with a blue look. Now when you hover over that brush, we're going to go and look for a button hover brush and to give it an orangey looking effect. And then when you press on it, we're going to look for yet another key called button press brush. So if you provide your own values for these keys, you can change the look and feel of TD applications very easily. So let me go ahead and pull up an application I wrote that allows me to change the theme on the fly here and save out a theme file. So this is a TD application, and on the left here are a set of random TD controls. On the right is actually a WPF Custom control that is rendering a control that I've written that will go ahead and pull in all of the brushes that are being used by the runtime. And I can go ahead and look at these various brushes and look at the XAML that is actually making them up. So if you remember, there's a button brush which is giving the button its look and feel by default. And you'll see it has a linear gradient brush which is applying a gradient fill. Now I can come in here and make edits to this. Maybe I want to have a darker theme here. Now I've removed a few of the gradient stops just to make it easier and quicker here to make a change. So I can apply new RGB values here, apply a change, and you can see that what I've done is I've updated in memory this button brush key, and instantly the TD control has picked up that change. So now it has a black look and feel. Now if I hover over it, still has that color. So I can go ahead and edit button hover brush to change how it looks when I hover over that button. And so maybe I'll give it a gray look as well. So now when I hover over that button, it's picking up this new key here and showing a gray look. And then I can go ahead and save this out as a XAML file. And if I were to open this, you'll see that it's just a standard resource dictionary, and I have all my key value pairs with updated values. Now I could easily, in my app.xaml file, include this resource dictionary with my custom brushes, and now I have a custom theme that I can distribute with my applications. So the final way that you can leverage XAML resource files is to easily localize your applications by using string resources. So resource files can be easily used to include string resources. So if you look at this screenshot here, you'll see I have a string resource called background1 text and then an English translation string value. So what you can do is create localized versions of these resource files and selectively compile your application to produce localized versions. So rather than hard coding string values into object titles, you can instead use XAML syntax to reference key value pairs in your XAML resource files. And so if you look at the attribute inspector here, the screenshot, rather than hard coding a English value in the push button title, I'm actually going to use a XAML markup extension which will pull in value from a resource file. So you'll see that there's an open curly bracket there, and I said static resource, and then go ahead and pull in the value for PB test title. And so using this approach, if I compile against a resource file that has English translations, the button will show the English value. I can then compile against a resource file that might have German or Spanish translation, and it'll pull in that value. So let me show you a quick demonstration of that. So here's a form, and I have several objects here. Here is a push button. And rather than having the object title with a string value, I have a XAML snippet where I'm saying go ahead and find a resource with the key PB test title. And I can do this on background text, tab controls, any object out there. Now again, I have my .xaml directory which has my custom XAML, and again, I'm not editing the form XAML. I'm just going to go ahead and edit the app.xaml file to pull in a resource dictionary. And so here I'm pulling in a resource dictionary called ENUS, which has my, my English translations for this application. And you'll see that I have, this PB test title, which is the key that I want to reference, and a host of other ones with their values in English. So if I go ahead and run this application, all of those static resource elements will be resolved into their English value here. Now, if I wanted to build a localized version, say for German, I could easily create another resource dictionary with all the values translated here. And then I simply go into my app.xaml file here, and pull in a new resource dictionary. And now when my application runs, you'll notice that all of those values are now resolved to the German translation for them. So what I've shown you here is how you can leverage your existing TD experience, and adding in a bit of WPF and XAML know-how, you can take your applications and customize them in ways that you've never been able to do before. So you can leverage the new WPF Custom control to incorporate third-party controls in your application. You can make use of the new custom XAML feature to edit XAML files directly, to get and set properties, to include new objects. Or you can leverage the powerful capabilities of XAML resource files to create new control templates that target our controls, create your own custom TD themes, or localize your applications without having to write any SAL code. So now I think we're going to open it up for some Q&A. First question we have is, how do you know which controls you can use to improve standard controls? Example, the progress bar control in the example. Well, like I mentioned before, most of our controls, like the progress bar, the C-meter control, extend from standard WPF controls. And so our C-meter control is actually extending from the WPF Custom control. And so probably your best bet is you can find many examples out there on the web. Those examples I've shown are actually ones that I found out on the web. And so you can pull them down and you simply change the target type from progress bar to SAL progress bar. And most of the time it should just work. But what we'll probably will have to do is actually create some documentation to help you go through that process so you know which ones you can apply custom control templates to and which ones you're probably not going to, because there are certain TD controls which don't have WPF equivalents. And for those, what we could do is actually provide you the control template that we're using by default, and then you can go and tweak them to however you like. The second question is, any option for getting yesterday's webinar? Now, that webinar, it was just given yesterday, that will be available and archived early next week. And same with today's webinar as well. That will be archived and available on our website next week. The next question is TD 6.0 shipped with examples on XAML? I don't believe we have any examples in our demos directory that are specific to customizing XAML, but certainly on our next release we can go ahead and do that, so that you have some examples of how you can go about doing this. So I'll go ahead and make a note of that, and maybe we'll try to get some in there for our next release. next question is, are our runtimes localized? And the answer is yes. And so for any control, like say the grid control has filtering capabilities where if you click on a column header, it gives you some options for filtering the records. All of our built-in controls do have, are localized, and we can provide a list. I believe we have German, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, but we can get you a full list there. But they are localized, yes. Find, you know, like the progress bar example that I showed. You know, what you would do is you could go online and simply Google, you know, progress bar WPF control templates, and you should get a whole host of examples out there. Also, if you go on to Microsoft's MSDN website, every one of their controls, they will have listed on MSDN with its control template. So they'll give you all the default control templates that are used for their controls, and you can download those and then change them to tweak the UI if you choose.
All right, so this is Matt again. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar. There was one other question about adding examples for 2D charts. And we do have a chart control, but I think what we need to do for this question is just get a little bit of additional information in terms of the types of what you're looking for in terms of samples. Not sure that, I don't think we have any samples readily for you, but we're more than happy to look into that. And so what we'll do is have you get in touch with your local representative, and if you can provide him or her with the appropriate details of what you're looking for, we'll go and see if we can't get what you need. All right. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and wrap that up for now, but Gary and I thank you for attending. We hope you found this valuable and useful. When you exit the session, you'll get a little one-page survey. Please take a moment and let us know how we did, if there were additional things you're looking for, and what else you'd like to see, what other topics, webinar topics you'd like to see on Team Developer 6. We're doing these monthly, and in fact on TD6 right now we're doing 2 a month. So we welcome any suggestions for specific topics that you'd like to see, because that drives what we end up showing you. A recorded version of this webinar will be made available next week. It'll be early next week, but it will be on our website in the usual place when you go to the unify.com webpage under, I want to say it's under press or something like that, but you go under there and you'll find webinars, and then you go under archived webinars. But I'm trying to think of what the main tab was. News and events. So my marketing person's whispering to me the answers. Thank you. All right, with that, wherever you may be, we wish you a great day, and stay tuned for the next Team Developer 6 webinar.